Emma, Daniel, Thomas, and Mark. 4 ordinary men living seemingly normal lives in Liverpool. But behind closed doors, they hid a secret so dark, so calculated, that it would shatter the city's sense of safety forever. This is the story of how fear, silence, and control collided in one of the most disturbing crimes Liverpool has ever seen. In early winter, Liverpool carried its usual rhythm. The streets were alive with people hurrying home under the gray sky. Buses rumbled past old brick buildings, and the scent of the river mixed with exhaust from nearby traffic. On the surface, it seemed like any other day, a city accustomed to its own mix of chaos and calm. Yet beneath this ordinary appearance, something dark and disturbing was about to break through the illusion of safety. It started with a young woman who had always kept to herself. Someone who rarely ventured out alone after dusk. On that fateful night she did. Something happened to her that would shake the city to its core. She was found hours later near an abandoned rail tunnel on the outskirts of the city. She was disoriented, trembling, and her clothes were torn. The injuries she carried told a silent story of violence, fear, and helplessness, but the details were almost impossible to piece together immediately. Local residents reported seeing her stumbling near the edge of the tunnel earlier that night, and some even called the authorities after noticing she seemed confused and terrified. When the police arrived, they could sense that this was no ordinary assault. The scene around her was eerily quiet, as if the city itself had held its breath while the crime unfolded. Investigators immediately began surveying the area, noting every detail, no matter how small. Torn fragments of fabric, footprints in the mud, and an unusual metallic object, partially buried in the dirt, caught their attention. It resembled a handmade symbol, and its purpose was unclear, but its presence suggested intention rather than chance. The detectives suspected that whoever had committed the act had prepared the location carefully and left behind more than just physical traces. It was the kind of evidence that hinted at premeditation, at planning carried out by someone with experience in hiding violence in plain sight. Nearby CCTV cameras offered a small blurry glimpse of movement. A group of men appeared together, walking in the direction of the tunnel. Their faces could not be seen clearly, but their synchronized pace suggested coordination, almost like a single unit moving with purpose. Investigators began to fear that this was not a random encounter. This was something different, something organized and deliberate. Even in a city accustomed to crime, this case felt unusual, its implications heavy and unsettling. As the night deepened, the sense of unease spread. Residents who passed the tunnel later reported strange noises, shadows that seemed to move independently, and an unexplained tension in the air. The city that believed it had seen every form of crime was suddenly confronted with the unknown. Liverpool, with its historic streets and familiar neighborhoods, had become the backdrop for an event that no one could fully understand yet. The discovery of the young woman near the tunnel was only the beginning, a chilling hint of a story far darker than anyone could have imagined. Detectives worked silently, carefully documenting every clue, knowing that the first hours of an investigation were critical. Every step taken, every photograph, and every observation mattered. Behind the calm exterior of the city, fear had begun to take root. The people of Liverpool, once confident in their sense of safety, would soon realize that something terrifying had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to emerge. This was the moment when silence became culture and when fear first began to spread like a shadow over the city. The moment the police arrived at the scene, they knew this case would be far from ordinary. Every detail was carefully observed and recorded, and nothing was dismissed as insignificant. The torn fragments of fabric scattered across the muddy ground immediately caught their attention. Some pieces were smeared with dirt, while others seemed freshly ripped, as if torn during a struggle. They were unlike any material typically found in the area, and the pattern of the tears suggested a violent confrontation rather than an accident. Officers photographed each piece meticulously, knowing that even the smallest clue could become the key to unlocking the truth behind the attack. Footprints crisscrossed the muddy ground near the tunnel entrance, some appearing larger and deeper than others, evidence of multiple individuals moving together. Forensic teams traced the impressions carefully, taking casts to preserve the shapes and sizes of the shoes. They noticed the prints were deliberately placed, avoiding puddles and rocks, almost as if the attackers had rehearsed their movements. This detail, subtle though it was, reinforced the suspicion that the assault was not a random act, but a carefully orchestrated plan. Among the debris, investigators discovered an unusual metallic object, partially buried in the mud. At first glance, it appeared to be a piece of scrap metal, but upon closer inspection, it revealed intricate carvings resembling a symbol. The purpose of the symbol was unclear, yet its presence implied intention. It was not something left behind accidentally. It was a mark, perhaps a signature or a warning. The discovery of this object introduced a chilling dimension to the case. Whoever had committed the crime was leaving clues for reasons that were not yet understood. It was a silent message, a fragment of a hidden story waiting to be deciphered. CCTV footage from surrounding streets provided another layer of complexity. A small group of men was captured walking together near the area just hours before the woman was found. Their faces were blurred and the grainy quality of the recordings made identification difficult, but their movements were strikingly coordinated. They walked side by side, pausing at intervals and glancing around as if ensuring no one was watching. The footage suggested preparation and control, further confirming that this was not a random attack. Investigators began piecing together a profile of individuals who operated with careful planning and secrecy, people who understood the consequences of being seen. As the night wore on, the investigation expanded beyond the tunnel. Officers canvassed nearby streets, speaking with residents and business owners. Many reported nothing unusual, but a few remembered seeing groups of men lingering in alleyways or near abandoned buildings in the weeks leading up to the incident. Though anecdotal, these accounts hinted at a network, a hidden world operating alongside the everyday life of the city. Detectives realized that solving the case would require looking past the surface of Liverpool streets into the shadowed spaces where danger quietly festered. Every piece of evidence, no matter how small, became a thread in a larger, more sinister tapestry. The torn fabric, the footprints, the metallic symbol, and the CCTV footage were not isolated clues. They were connected. Each detail deepened the sense of unease, revealing a carefully orchestrated act of violence and raising urgent questions. Who were these men? Why had they chosen this location? And how long had they been operating in the shadows before someone finally crossed their path? By the early hours of the morning, detectives had begun to map out a preliminary theory. They understood that this attack was a warning and a demonstration of control. The city, unaware until now, had been infiltrated by a force moving silently and deliberately. In the quiet of Liverpool's winter streets, the shadows seemed to lengthen, and the first real sense of fear began to settle over a community that had once felt safe. As the investigation unfolded, detectives began to uncover unsettling patterns, pointing to a hidden world beneath Liverpool's ordinary streets. Initial interviews and digital evidence hinted at the presence of a group operating quietly, almost invisibly within the city. This was not a traditional gang involved in public fights or petty crime. It was more elusive, organized around secrecy and coded communication. Residents in certain neighborhoods had noticed unusual gatherings, small groups meeting at late hours, leaving and arriving on foot or by car without drawing attention. For years, these gatherings had gone unnoticed, their significance hidden behind a carefully maintained veneer of normalcy. The metallic symbol found near the tunnel became a crucial lead. Police discovered that it appeared repeatedly in online forums frequented by a small number of users discussing obscure activities in Liverpool. The symbol seemed to function as a signature, a mark that connected different events and individuals without exposing them publicly. Detectives traced posts and messages back to anonymous accounts, piecing together the existence of a network that thrived on secrecy. Every detail suggested an underground presence that was deliberate, careful, and highly organized. Unlike common street gangs, this group avoided unnecessary exposure, operated in private locations, and used coded language to hide their activities from authorities and the general public. Forensic analysis of recovered digital devices revealed patterns of planning that were chilling in their precision. Messages indicated coordinated efforts to monitor specific areas, track potential victims, and maintain strict internal rules that prevented outsiders from learning anything. Investigators realized that the attackers' network had likely existed for years, growing quietly while remaining invisible to the police and the public. Every ordinary individual could have crossed paths with them without ever noticing, highlighting just how insidious their presence had become. The discovery of the underground network also brought to light the psychological dimension of their actions. The group seemed to operate on control and intimidation rather than financial gain or traditional criminal motives. Evidence suggested that fear itself was a tool, a way to assert dominance and maintain secrecy. They avoided violence in public spaces, preferring locations where witnesses were unlikely and where they could act with confidence that their actions would remain hidden. The tunnel where the young woman was attacked became the perfect example, secluded, unmonitored, and entirely controlled by the group for that moment in time. Detectives began constructing profiles of the men involved. They looked for individuals who were social in appearance, blending into everyday life while maintaining access to private spaces and resources. Ordinary jobs, neutral reputations, and minimal criminal records made them almost invisible to society's radar. The challenge was identifying these people without tipping them off, as any public investigation could alert them and lead to further attempts to hide evidence. The realization that danger could exist behind seemingly normal faces sent shockwaves through the investigation team. Every new lead painted a picture of a highly organized and disciplined underground operation. This group had developed rules, symbols, and codes that allowed them to act without detection. Their presence challenged assumptions about safety in Liverpool, revealing that a city could harbor a deeply disturbing network while appearing calm and familiar on the surface. As investigators continued to follow the threads, they began to see the scale of the danger. This was not an isolated incident, but a glimpse into a hidden world capable of producing repeated harm unless stopped. The hunt for the individuals responsible would require intelligence, patience, and an understanding of human psychology, as the city faced a threat that thrived in silence and shadow. As the days passed, the young woman slowly began to regain her strength, both physically and mentally. Each movement, each step she took was a reminder of the violence she had endured, yet she persisted. Investigators understood that her account was crucial to understanding the case, and they approached with caution, respecting her trauma while seeking the details needed to bring the attackers to justice. The memories she shared were fragmented at first, snippets of shadows, movements, and sounds. But even these incomplete recollections offered critical insight into what had occurred. She described being followed from a bus stop late in the evening, her steps traced by figures she could barely make out. The fear she felt during those moments was palpable, a terror that seemed to paralyze her as she tried to escape. Though she could not provide clear images of faces, she remembered certain distinguishing marks. A symbol painted on a wall nearby, a metallic glint reflecting light, and a particular smell that lingered in the air. Each detail, though small, painted a picture of a group operating with intent and control. Investigators realized that these men were not acting impulsively. Every movement, every action had been planned with precision. Her recollections also revealed a sense of ritual in the attackers' behavior. The location where she had been taken was chosen carefully, secluded yet accessible, allowing the perpetrators to operate without interruption. The symbol she remembered seeing was identical to the one found near the tunnel entrance, confirming that the object was more than decoration. It was a mark of ownership, a signature left by the group to assert power and leave a warning. This revelation intensified the investigation. The metallic symbol, initially dismissed as an oddity, now represented the group's presence and their ability to remain hidden while instilling fear. The survivor's courage in sharing her story gradually began to unravel the layers of secrecy surrounding the attackers. Police used her observations to refine their search, comparing her recollections with existing CCTV footage, street patterns, and neighborhood reports. Pieces that had once seemed disconnected now began to fit together. The group's methodical movements, the careful selection of meeting spots, and the signs left behind all pointed to a deliberate, calculated network. Investigators started to see a pattern emerging, one that suggested the group had been operating in Liverpool for longer than anyone had realized, leaving traces unnoticed by the public but detectable through careful analysis. Her account also highlighted the psychological impact of the crime. She described an overwhelming feeling of helplessness, the way fear had paralyzed her ability to react, and the constant awareness of being watched even after the incident. This fear was not just her own. It was the mechanism the group relied on to maintain control, to ensure that their actions remained unchallenged. The city itself had become an unwitting accomplice, its streets providing cover and anonymity for a force that thrived in silence. Through her story, the investigators understood the human cost behind the evidence. It was no longer just footprints, symbols, or CCTV footage. They were dealing with a network that targeted lives, exploited vulnerability, and manipulated fear. Every memory she shared strengthened the case and brought detectives closer to identifying the men responsible. At the same time, it sent a chilling message to the city. Danger was not always visible, and even in a place that seemed familiar and safe, evil could operate quietly, leaving only fear in its wake. Her courage became the key that began to illuminate a hidden darkness, guiding the investigators deeper into the world of a group that had for too long existed in shadow. As news of the attack spread, Liverpool began to feel the weight of fear settling over the city. What had once been ordinary streets filled with casual evening strollers and families returning from work now carried an undercurrent of unease. People spoke quietly in shops and cafes, sharing rumors of the assault and wondering if the attackers were still at large. Social media was flooded with warnings, posts urging residents to remain vigilant, and advice on avoiding dangerous areas. The city, known for its vibrant nightlife and sense of community, was suddenly gripped by suspicion, every shadow scrutinized and every alleyway approached with caution. Community groups organized emergency meetings to address the growing fear. Neighborhood watch volunteers increased their patrols, and local authorities worked to reassure residents while warning them of the potential danger. Flyers were posted in public spaces, detailing areas considered risky and urging women, in particular, to travel in groups. Despite these efforts, anxiety continued to mount. The realization that a hidden group could operate undetected, choosing victims and locations at their discretion, created a sense of helplessness that spread faster than any official warning. Police presence in the city increased, with officers stationed at key locations and areas identified as high risk. Patrols were intensified near abandoned buildings, tunnels, and underpasses, yet the group responsible for the attack remained elusive. Every lead seemed to reveal more questions than answers. Residents who had once felt safe within the familiarity of their neighborhoods now began to view even routine routes as potentially dangerous. The ordinary rhythms of life were disrupted. Students avoided late-night travel, commuters altered their routes, and families hesitated before leaving their homes after dark. The media played a powerful role in amplifying the city's fear. Television stations broadcasted updates on the investigation, focusing on the mysterious nature of the group and the symbolic markings left at the scene. Newspapers featured editorials on public safety, raising awareness but also heightening tension. Every mention of the metallic symbol and the survivor's account made the threat feel immediate and tangible. Liverpool, a city that had faced crime before, now confronted a danger that was both invisible and meticulously planned. Amid the growing panic, detectives worked tirelessly behind the scenes, piecing together fragments of evidence, reviewing footage, and analyzing patterns in movement and behavior. They recognized that this group thrived on secrecy and intimidation, using fear to maintain control over their actions. The city's collective anxiety played directly into their hands, amplifying the sense of danger and reinforcing the group's ability to operate undetected. Each day without a breakthrough made the public more cautious, more suspicious, and more alert to the possibility of another attack. Despite the fear, the investigation began to yield small victories. Witnesses who had previously been reluctant to speak now came forward with observations of suspicious activity. Anonymous tips provided clues about locations where the group might meet or hide evidence. Each revelation, though minor, helped to create a clearer picture of the network operating beneath the city's surface. The work was painstaking and slow, but it offered hope that the hidden threat could eventually be exposed. Liverpool's streets remained tense, the air thick with uncertainty. Life continued, but it did so under a shadow. The city had learned, in the most terrifying way, that appearances could be deceiving. Danger could exist quietly behind familiar faces, in places once considered safe, and in moments when no one was paying attention. As fear spread, so too did the resolve of both the public and the investigators. They understood that exposing the group would not only bring justice to the survivor but also restore a sense of safety to a city that had been forced to confront the darkness lurking in its own shadows. After weeks of painstaking investigation, the case finally reached a turning point. Forensic technicians had analyzed every piece of evidence collected from the scene: the torn fabric, the footprints, and the metallic symbol. But it was a microscopic trace that provided the breakthrough. On one fragment of fabric, investigators discovered tiny particles of engine grease. The chemical composition and residue pattern were distinctive, matching a rare type of motorcycle commonly used in certain areas of the city. This small, almost invisible clue became the key to unraveling the network responsible for the attack. Detectives immediately began tracing the origin of motorcycles, fitting the description. After hours of cross-referencing sales records, repair logs, and online marketplaces, the investigation led them to a small repair shop near the docks. From the outside it looked like any ordinary garage, its walls covered with grime and faded advertisements. Yet the officers sensed something was unusual. There was a subtle order to the vehicles inside, a sense that every tool, part, and machine was in its designated place, maintained with care. The repair shop, though seemingly mundane, had become the epicenter of a hidden operation. Upon entering the basement of the garage, investigators uncovered a scene that confirmed their suspicions. Behind a false wall they found an assortment of masks, clothing, and gloves, all meticulously organized. Phones with erased data and laptops containing encrypted files were stacked neatly on shelves. The metallic symbol, the same mark found near the tunnel, was painted across a wooden board and worn by some of the items stored there. It was a chilling revelation, a clear indication that this was not a one-time act of violence but part of an ongoing, carefully maintained network. The items recovered suggested a level of planning and discipline that was deeply unsettling. Every piece of clothing, every mask, and every device had a purpose. The attackers had prepared for repeated operations, ensuring that their identities remained hidden and that no trace could be easily followed. The basement's organized chaos reflected the mindset of the men responsible: calculated, meticulous, and entirely focused on maintaining secrecy while exerting control over their victims. The discovery transformed the investigation from a search for unknown perpetrators into a targeted pursuit of identifiable individuals. Digital forensics provided further insight. Despite attempts to erase or encrypt files, technicians recovered messages detailing surveillance, reconnaissance, and discussions about potential targets. The communications revealed that the group monitored areas carefully, planning encounters that minimized risk while maximizing control. The same symbol appeared repeatedly in the messages, reinforcing its significance as more than decoration. It was a badge of belonging, a mark of ownership, and a signal to other members of the network. The breakthrough reignited hope among investigators. The realization that the gang had a physical base meant that authorities could now act strategically, surveilling the location and gathering intelligence to identify the men behind the attacks. The discovery also highlighted the danger posed by individuals who operated invisibly within the city, blending into everyday life while maintaining a hidden world of fear and manipulation. Liverpool, once unaware of the threat lurking nearby, now had the first tangible lead in bringing the perpetrators to justice. Every clue, every recovered item, and every decrypted message brought the case into sharper focus. Detectives understood that the road ahead would be complex and dangerous, but they were finally closing in. The repair shop, ordinary in appearance yet extraordinary in the darkness it concealed, became the starting point for the unraveling of a network that had operated in silence for too long. With this breakthrough, hope and determination replaced fear, marking the beginning of the end for a group that had terrorized Liverpool from the shadows. With the discovery of the repair shop and its hidden basement, investigators finally had a concrete lead. But identifying the individuals behind the network proved to be a complex task. The men were careful, meticulous, and aware of how easily small mistakes could expose them. They had blended seamlessly into the fabric of Liverpool's daily life, appearing ordinary and unremarkable to anyone who might have crossed their paths. It quickly became clear that these were not career criminals. They had no long criminal records, no violent histories, and none of the usual markers that law enforcement often relied upon. Their ordinariness made them invisible, their danger hidden behind the facade of normal lives. Digital evidence recovered from the shop became the key to identification. Phones, laptops, and encrypted messages revealed patterns of communication and interaction that could be traced back to specific individuals. Cross-referencing these communications with public records, CCTV footage, and local surveillance, investigators narrowed the list of suspects to 4 men. Each had a stable job, a steady routine, and a seemingly quiet life. Some were employed in offices, others in small businesses, and none had ever been publicly associated with criminal activity. It was the perfect cover, allowing them to operate undetected while continuing their disturbing activity. The investigation revealed that these men had maintained strict rules within their group. Every member understood the importance of secrecy, communication codes, and careful planning. They avoided unnecessary risk, meeting only in private spaces and carefully choosing locations where they could operate without being observed. Messages recovered from digital devices detailed surveillance of certain areas, patterns of movement, and even assessments of potential targets. Every step had been considered in advance. What had initially seemed like a spontaneous or impulsive crime was now revealed to be part of a methodical, ongoing operation. Investigators also began to understand the psychological aspect behind the group's actions. They were not motivated by financial gain or revenge, but by control. The fear and silence they created were tools, carefully cultivated to maintain dominance and ensure compliance from those they targeted. Each attack, each symbol left behind, each carefully orchestrated movement reinforced the group's control and perpetuated their power. The ordinary appearance of the men in daily life only added to the horror, as it demonstrated the chilling reality that danger could exist unnoticed in plain sight. The breakthrough in identifying the 4 men allowed law enforcement to begin planning arrests. Surveillance of their homes, workplaces, known routes was conducted with extreme caution. The authorities knew that any sudden or careless move could alert them, giving the men time to destroy evidence or disappear. With patience, strategy, and coordination, the net was gradually closing. Every phone ping, every movement, and every interaction was tracked, revealing patterns that confirmed what investigators already suspected. These 4 men were responsible for orchestrating the attack, as well as other potential crimes that had gone undetected for years. The revelation that ordinary, seemingly law-abiding men could lead such a hidden, dangerous life sent shockwaves through Liverpool. Families, neighbors, and colleagues were left stunned at the realization that the individuals who had terrorized the city operated from within their own community. The investigation now entered its critical phase, moving from evidence gathering to bringing these men to justice. The ordinary faces behind extraordinary evil were finally identified, and the city was one step closer to uncovering the full extent of the network that had thrived in silence for far too long. The arrest of the 4 men sent shockwaves through Liverpool. News spread quickly, and the city was gripped a mixture of relief and disbelief. Ordinary men, living ordinary lives, had orchestrated acts of violence in secrecy for years, and now the truth was finally emerging. Families and neighbors struggled to reconcile the men they had seen daily with the monsters revealed by the investigation. The metallic symbol, once an obscure mark near a tunnel, had become infamous, representing a hidden network of fear and control that had operated undetected in the city for far too long. Courtrooms were filled with people eager to witness justice unfold. The survivor's courage became the foundation of the case, her testimony detailing the methodical planning, psychological manipulation, and control exerted by the men. The courtroom became a battleground where hidden truths were exposed, revealing the extent to which fear had been cultivated and maintained. The four men, once confident in their secrecy, faced the full weight of evidence meticulously gathered over weeks of investigation. For the first time, their carefully maintained facade began to crumble. Evidence from the repair shop, digital communications, and forensic analysis formed an unbreakable chain. Every detail of the planning and execution of the attacks was laid bare. The jury and public alike were confronted with the stark contrast between the ordinary appearances of the accused and the extraordinary lengths they had gone to commit these crimes. The metallic symbol appeared repeatedly, both in physical evidence and in digital files, symbolizing the reach and influence of the network. It was no longer a minor detail. It had become the defining mark of a dangerous and calculating operation. The psychological impact on the survivor and the city was profound. The trial did not just determine guilt, it validated the fear, trauma, and uncertainty that had spread through Liverpool. For the survivor, each day of testimony was a reminder of the violence endured, but it also became a testament to resilience and bravery. Her account guided the investigators and prosecutors, ensuring that every step in the investigation translated into justice. The courtroom proceedings, though harrowing, became a symbol of accountability, demonstrating that even the most hidden and calculated crimes could be brought to light. The sentencing marked the final chapter of the case. Each man received a lengthy prison term, reflecting the severity and premeditation of their crimes. The verdict sent a clear message: secrecy and silence could no longer shield them from justice. Liverpool, a city that had lived under the shadow of fear, began to breathe again, though the memories of the events lingered in public consciousness. The trial and its outcome underscored the importance of vigilance, community awareness, and the courage of those willing to stand against hidden threats. Even after the trial, the impact of the case continued to resonate. Liverpool's streets slowly returned to normal, but the knowledge that danger had once thrived in silence left a lasting impression. The survivor emerged as a figure of strength, inspiring others, and reminding the city that courage and truth could overcome even the darkest networks. The case became a stark lesson in the importance of uncovering hidden evil, confronting fear, and ensuring that silence would never again allow violence to operate unchecked. Liverpool had been scarred, but it had also learned to remain vigilant, resilient, and determined to protect its community from those who sought to exploit it in the shadows.